It is just so lovely to see you all again and to see some of you for the first time. Lovely to have all of you joining us virtually again. And this is coming back to this Bima for yet another day of Yom Tov is a little surreal for me because I was out of town for all 3 days of Chol HaMoed. Sometimes life gets lifey, as the kids say. So on Monday, my mom had minor surgery. Everything went fine. It was a minor surgery, but it was time sensitive. We couldn't really put it off. And so it just so happened that on the same day this past Monday, my nephew, my sister's son, turned 3, which was adorable. And it also just so happened that on the same day this past Monday, my sister was due with her second child. There's no baby yet. Everything is well. She's saying the hardest part is everyone asking for updates on what's going on, so everything is fine. But it's been an action-packed 3 days for me, and it also happened to be Chol Moed Pesach. So this year, the middle of Pesach, this concept of the middle of Pesach has really stood out to me. Obviously, we think a lot about the beginning, the Seders. We think about the end and return to Chametz and the cleanup. But this year, I was really thinking about the middle. So I know probably many or most of you have heard of this idea of going away for Pesach. And the local opportunity is going to Camp Ramah in Ojai. And so the idea here is, for people who aren't familiar with this concept, instead of cleaning your house, storing away the chametz, and just selling the chametz, you close and lock and sell your entire residence for the duration of Pesach. And so for some of us, this is a real win-win. You don't have to clean and you get to go on vacation. And so this is great for some of us. And so I know a few people who have spent or are spending this year Pesach at Camp Ramah in Ojai. On the East Coast, for some of us who are familiar with this, there are lots of different options, often in hotels as well as summer camps. I was once visiting the East Coast and ended up in a conversation where everyone except me grew up going to Pesach hotels. And I'm like, this is not an experience that I'm so familiar with. But I spoke to one person recently, the only time I've had this conversation, who said that his family went to a Pesach hotel just once. It wasn't for them. They didn't really like the experience. And it gave me a new perspective because I've never done this. It sounds pretty awesome to me, easy as well as simple. Hotel rooms are easy to clean, not much chametz to remove. Maybe there's special Passover coffee machines or I don't know. But a hotel kitchen, it's a big kitchen to kosher, but it's only one kitchen. And as we all know, we can prepare a lot of delicious food on Pesach with and without matzah. We can have like the matzah kugel, but also just roasted potatoes or things that we can have throughout the year. But the thing about going away for Pesach is that someone is thinking through all these details, and that person is not you. You get to sit back and enjoy. But hearing for the first time about a family who tried this and was like, we won't do this again, made me think there are actually downsides to this experience. So the first and the most obvious, you don't have the Seder at home. Again, some of us are like, I would love to not have the Seder at home. That would be great. But others of us are like, no, I'd rather have it at home. I could say for myself, the first time we had Seder in our own home was at the beginning of the pandemic. We were not planning on being at home for Seder that year. We planned, God laughs. But now that I'm used to it, I would miss it if it were different. We have our Seder plate. We've got, our little special traditions, our things, each with its own story. Of course, it's a huge part of the experience of Pesach to switch over your kitchen and to switch it back, clean out the old food, put the chametz away. And at the end of the holiday, you have like 7 boxes of matzah left over because you bought that extra case and a half a jar of gefilte fish and one last macaron. And you kind of get to enjoy these foods after the holiday, even though we're back to regular food. But so I've been thinking this year about going away for Pesach versus staying at home for Pesach, thinking about the middle of Pesach because I had to travel in the middle of Pesach. And my experience this year, these past 3 days, was not like going to a Pesach hotel. It wasn't like that at all, actually. So first of all, going away for Pesach this year, traveling to Sonoma County in Northern California, I'm departing one of the global centers of Jewish life, which means I'm departing one of the greatest, best selections of kosher supermarkets you can find in the world, and departing for a place where there are definitely Jews and synagogues, but it is not the same. And I was not staying with people who observe Pesach. I was with my interfaith family who are extremely understanding and supportive of who I am and what I do and how I do it. But that doesn't mean they know chametz from matzah necessarily. And so I just told them, since it's Passover, I'm not going to eat any normal food. I'm going to eat like totally separate from you, which goes over more easily because I'm very flexible with kashrut the rest of the year. I always do my best to eat what they're eating. Not that that always works out perfectly, but I try, and it's the thought and the effort that counts. It's the approach that definitely counts. But to say it plainly, this was a Passover challenge for sure these past few days. A little bit ridiculous and kind of fun. And so many of us who observe Passover already know the easiest way to do this is to buy everything from a kosher supermarket. It's kind of like going to a Passover hotel. All the details are taken care of for you. And if you're not going to buy everything for a kosher supermarket, or if you live somewhere where you can't buy everything from a kosher supermarket, it's still very doable. It's just a little bit more of a detailed process. And there's a key reason why, which seems like and is just a particular detail, but it's the nullification of Chametz. So last week we searched for the Chametz, we burned the Chametz, and we make a formal declaration once in the evening and again in the morning. We say all the Chametz in my possession, whether I know about it or not, is hereby ownerless and nullified like the dust of the earth. And this is actually very important from a Jewish legal perspective. It makes a big impact. And so the upshot is, once the holiday of Passover has started, after you've said these things, you have to be even more careful about what you buy at the grocery store so you don't acquire even the smallest amount of chametz. So what does this mean in real life? What did this mean for my trip? First of all, I brought as much stuff as I could from home. It was easier because I was driving and not flying. And then, so what about all the stops along the way when I was driving? Usually when I make this drive to see family, I buy food along the way. I have my little special things I enjoy. And this time, traveling during Pesach, I did two things. One, refill the water bottle. And two, buy plain unflavored black coffee. And so honestly, this practice is pretty lenient. Refilling a water bottle versus buying a new sealed water bottle, there's a concern there technically. And plain unflavored black coffee, when you buy it from the supermarket, it doesn't require a hechsher, even if purchased in the middle of Pesach. But since I was not the one making the coffee, I can't be entirely sure, but sometimes you just have to make a call and do the best you can. I wouldn't be so lenient if I didn't need to travel, but I did. So that's the choice I made, and that's why I made it. So there's the travel, and then there's the arrival and the meals there. I brought most of the stuff I would need. Got my yogurt, cottage cheese, tuna, avocado, matzah. We got a great Passover selection. And then to the grocery store. Okay, and so I bought unflavored seltzer water, because you got to have bubbles if you can get bubbles, and grapes, bananas, apples, oranges, snap peas. I even found broccoli in a bag with a hechsher on it. I was like, oh, who knew? This is pretty cool. Makes life easier. And then, of course, I went to the kosher section of the non-kosher supermarket. Deep sigh. The selection was not what we're used to here. Of course, the highlight of the section was matzah that is not kosher for Passover. I feel like I did actually go to that store before and buy kosher for Passover matzah, but oh well, not this time. So it had some, products that are kosher but not for Passover. It did have some gefilte fish and I think some jam. And I did buy these coconut cookie things that are they're not as good as macaroons because they don't have eggs, but I ate some. They were yummy, whatever, okay. And then, so that's the shopping. So then there's the eating meals with other people. So I just ate my own food, and my family, as always, super patient, non-judgmental. But then the 3-year-old wanted to share his food with me, so there was a little confusion about that, but we worked it out. It was very sweet. And I did use some of their non-iodized salt. So this is another food that never requires a hechsher, even when purchased in the middle of Passover. But I'm not the one supervising the salt shaker, so you can't really be sure that no one's put chametz in there. But sometimes you just have to make a call and do the best you can. And I wouldn't be so lenient if I weren't trying to keep Passover with my non-Jewish family, but I was. So that's the choice I made, and that's why I made it. And here's the thing about all these rules. They can be a bit exasperating, at times. We had our Torah study last Shabbat at Kiddush. We've started a new adult education class. It's the first Shabbat of the month at Kiddush. And shockingly, not shockingly, because we're doing this on Passover, the topic came up of rules in Jewish tradition that not only do they not seem to make a lot of sense, they also seem to cause interpersonal confusion and strife. So tell that to my 3-year-old nephew who wants to share his tortilla chips with me. The question asked in the class was, not word for word, but the essence of the question was, why do we have these rules that make no sense? And I responded, and this is still my answer today, these rules are who we are. They just are who we are. No, they don't make sense all the time. But they're authentic. It's authentic. That's what true identity, what authenticity is ultimately all about. It doesn't always make sense, but it is real. It is true. I was speaking to someone a couple of weeks ago. They were telling me their story of dating, right? This person is committed to Jewish practice. They're dating. They went on a date with someone who isn't Jewish. And the moment arrived when they had to explain themselves and say, okay, I'm committed to Jewish religious practice, and explain this to a person who was not Jewish and who was not religious, who'd been a little bit turned off to some non-Jewish religions. It happens sometimes. And this person explained Judaism by saying, it's not really about what you believe, it's more about what you do. And the other person was like, okay, I can work with that. And the couple is still together today, which I think is sweet, right? And Judaism, it's about what we do. And even with all the ridiculousness of keeping Passover, traveling amongst all these non-Jews, there was something really special about going to the truck stop and being like, black coffee, no creamer, no nothing. There was something special about eating matzah and avocado while everyone else at the table is eating burritos. And I really only came to appreciate this fully yesterday when I was driving home. I was stopping at the Starbucks in Coalinga off the 5 highway. I'm sure some of us know this place and have been there. Yeah, so the trip was almost over. I had a few hours of driving left. I really needed some coffee and a little stop and stretch. And so I parked and I got out of the car. And when I'm traveling, I try to throw out the trash as I go, and the car's always a mess by the end anyway, but so I just finished a box of matzah. So I get out of the car, I'm, of course, covered in matzah crumbs. I walk into the Starbucks. I'm tired from driving. I have an empty matzah box in one hand and an empty coffee cup in the other, and I go over to the trash can. And it's one of those, like, they have the recycle landfill thing. So I'm lingering by the trash can, sorting out my trash, and this guy's on the other side, and he sees me with the empty matzah box, and he's shocked. He's surprised. He doesn't even really, he stops looking at me, and he just looks at the matzah box, and he throws out his trash, and he turns away, and he leaves. And this is a profound moment of Jewish connection, because I was sure this person is Jewish, and he'd kind of forgotten that it's Passover right now. And I reminded him with my empty matzah box. And I realized that part of what's so special about this time of year is we draw back a little bit more than usual from the outside world. And the reason why this is special is that it allows us to connect with one another differently than we usually would. Because being Jewish, it's about what we do, and that's true even if, or even when, we don't really do that thing we're supposed to do. And so it's so special to withdraw from the outside world and to be here with all of you today. We made it through the middle of Pesach, and now we get to coast to the end. It's amazing to see you today. Looking forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Chag Sameach.